Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at a relatively early morning, particularly here in the UK, and for those of you in Europe as well. Thank you for joining us for the first Chapel York Philanthropy Briefing. And these were intended to give an opportunity to hear from charities in a sector about what's going on in their sector in a way that was both available to you, to your clients, etc., and also gives them an opportunity to talk about what they're doing. This is our first one, so we thank you for being at it. It is a great pleasure that we invite some of the most prestigious arts and heritage organizations in the UK and Europe to be with us. This event is, and the ones following, are hosted by us, Chapel York, and also by our foundations in the UK, Switzerland, and in the Netherlands. I would also like to thank our partners, Beacon Gaynor, Philanthropy Impact, and the British Swiss Chamber of Commerce for joining with us in presenting these. So the format for today is that we'll have 15 minutes from each of our three speakers about their organization, what they're doing, what COVID-19 has done to them. And afterwards, there'll be a short question and answer period. Simon Daniels, unfortunately, is going to have to leave us after his remarks, although if you have any for him, he will be able to spend a few minutes answering questions at that time. But then Valentina and Christopher will be with us for the whole period. Again, one of the important things is that we all understand this is not a pitch time. This is an information opportunity. It's a time for wealth advisors and their clients to learn about areas of charitable activity that you wouldn't often get to. And we're very pleased to be able to provide this opportunity to you all. So with very little ado, I want to introduce Simon Daniels from Historic Royal Palaces to talk about what's going on with HRP during the last year and in general. Over to you, Simon.
So Historic Royal Palaces, we're a team of people that love and look after 6 of the greatest palaces in the world. They are Tower of London, Hampton Court Palace, the Banqueting House in Whitehall, Kensington Palace, Kew Palace, and Hillsborough Castle and Gardens in Northern Ireland. They're some of the UK's most important cultural treasures, perhaps chief among them the Tower of London, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the most popular paid-for visitor attraction in the country. They hold nationally and internationally significant collections, including the crown jewels, and the palaces make up a critical part of the country's offer to domestic and international travellers. We're also a major education provider with over 200,000 school visits to our sites in pre-pandemic times, that is, and we hold independent research organisation status, which makes us analogous to a university. And indeed, we offer now an MA in Heritage Management, which we do in collaboration with Queen Mary University of London. We were established as an independent charity in 1998, and whilst the palaces are owned by the Crown, or in the case of Hillsborough Castle, the UK government, people are often quite surprised that we generate all our own funds. And we receive no regular funding from the government or the Crown. And our model, which worked very successfully, was to generate the majority of those funds, around 66 to 70%, from admissions revenue. We're a leader in the culture and heritage sectors, and just by way of the sort of give a sense of the scale of the investment we've been able to make in the palaces since we were established in 98. Between 98 and 2020, we increased annual visit numbers to the palaces from 2.5 to 5 million, and we've invested 170 million in capital development projects and 106 in structural and conservation improvements to the palaces. And in recent years, we've also become very well known at the Tower of London for moments of national reflection. And people might remember the poppies display we did in 2014, where we filled them out with over 800,000 ceramic poppies to mark the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the First World War. So we entered January 2020 with a robust financial position. We carefully built up £35 million in reserves to fund future major projects. We have a reputation for excellence and an almost limitless ambition for the palaces. If you fast forward 5 months to May 2020, our palaces had been shut for almost 3 months. I was one of a handful of staff not on furlough and on a call with one of our funders from home, of course, explaining that without urgent help, we would be unable to complete critical repairs to one of Hampton Court's 241 elaborate Tudor chimneys. That for me sort of encapsulated in that moment the sort of impact on us of the pandemic. So what did we do? How have we changed? And more importantly, perhaps, is that chimney still standing? So we closed the palaces on 20th of March as part of the national effort to beat the virus. And apart from a brief period over the summer and some limited opening of the gardens at Hampton Court and Hillsborough Castle for local people, they've pretty much remained closed all year. April to September, as you might imagine, is our peak trading period, during which we'd normally make around 65% of our income. So clearly being closed for that period had a devastating impact, and we are anticipating lost income of around £102 million, or 92% of the budget that we set ourselves in 2021. And we face a very significant net deficit, and only the use of our reserves really was maintaining us as a going concern. As you'd expect, we took full advantage of the immediate financial assistance offered by the government, and we had as many as 80% of our staff on furlough, utilising the job retention scheme, and that, which is something we still continue to do. We also cut all non-essential expenditure, and we introduced a temporary reduction of 20% in wages for all staff between June and October, with a real focus on pulling through and surviving together. We also looked ahead and reasoned that, assuming we survived the year, our markets wouldn't return to their pre-pandemic levels for at least 5 years, and so that we were going to have to live on less income for a considerable period of time. That initiated a restructure of the organisation in order to make some significant reductions in our wage bill, which we were able to actually reduce by 40% to live in considerably smaller income for the longer term. And if you look at the size of organisation we have now, we're about as we've sort of shrunk back to the size we were in 2006. Naturally, the situation put even greater emphasis for us on fundraising, and we were very thrilled to receive grants from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, emergency funding, and secure a number of new donors on both sides of the Atlantic, with help of, as always, from the Chapel York team. And this brings us really to what's been the key piece of the jigsaw in terms of our survival, and also in terms of our future, and that's the Cultural Recovery Fund, which is perhaps something you'll hear more of in these talks. But very briefly, that was a £1.56 billion package announced in the summer to stop arts and heritage organisations failing, and that was announced by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport and the Treasury, and it was very much designed to help organisations to survive through to the end of the 31st of March this year, and to make sure there was still a sector to enjoy when we recovered from the pandemic. There were two strands to it. There's a grants programme of £3 million and a repayable finance option offering loans from £3 million and above without an upper limit. The need we had was to survive after our reserves had been exhausted, and in particular to survive through to spring 2022, which was when we expected markets to have returned sufficiently for us actually to be earning money. again, and we would be able to stand on our own 2 feet. Given the scale of our operation, a grant of £3 million wouldn't have been enough to make a difference. And so we applied to the Repayable Finance Fund, and following a very intense process, in December, we were pleased to welcome the Culture Secretary, Oliver Dowden, to the Tower to announce the first tranche of repayable finance awards, including ours, which was of £40 million, which we'll be repaying with interest over the next 14 years. And in addition to that loan from the Cultural Recovery Fund, we'd also received just recently a grant of £570,000 from the Northern Ireland Cultural Recovery Fund to help our operations at Hillsborough. So that's our new reality. We're forecasting a gradual return of visitors from under 500,000 this year, reaching, we hope, something like 3.5, perhaps 2.5 million by around 2024. We'll be living on reduced income and paying back a loan, severely limiting our capacity for investment into new experiences and improvements at the palaces. And of course, we're still dealing with a lot of uncertainty. We had, for example, assumed re-trading at Easter, but our sites will now remain closed, largely closed, until at least the 19th of May as a result of the phasing of the Prime Minister's roadmap, which means we'll miss another crucial Easter trading period. This places even greater, again, emphasis on fundraising, which is now really becoming something of an existential issue for us in order to do big things. But there are other changes from the pandemic, new things we've tried and new ways of working that I think will at least inform the thinking of historic royal palaces for the long term. So just to run through some of those, very much more a sort of focus on commercial return of sites and of activities. And we have a very simple sort of commercial objective now, which is essentially making sure we get back to break even. We brought forward some innovations in how we do things that we had talked about, but had seemed often quite forbiddingly complicated, in particular the time tickets for our sites, and making a pivot to pre-booked rather than turning up, visitors turning up on the day. And we've done that for the periods that we've been open. Even into the realms of hospitality and commercial events, so-called hybrid events, where some people are in the physical space enjoying the wine in the canapes, and others are joining remotely in some way, are now a significant opportunity for us, and indeed we're sort of leading the industry forums and so on in making those a reality. We've also tried new ways of staying in touch and connecting with our audiences. We've had a series of talks since May last year online on a platform called Crowdcast that have been hosted by Lucy Worsley, our co-chief curator, and they've offered really incredible content to an engaged audience on over 6 continents, and they've actually performed well for us financially, raising over £100,000 in donations in that time. So we're really thrilled about that, and it's also helping us reach our friends and supporters overseas in a much more engaging and far-reaching way. And we're certainly reaching more of our American supporters, for example, than we ever did through sort of in-person lecture tours. And one thing that I do hope that we'll see continue is increased engagement from visitors and members and others in our charity cause. Something that's really struck me over the past year has been the number of people who've made direct contact looking to support us. So perhaps come across our plight, which has been, or our situation rather, which has been covered in the newspapers and so on, and that's actually stimulated people to get in touch and offer help and do donations. And I think people really realise that we might not always be there anymore, which was probably not something they'd ever thought about, and that our very particular stewardship of the palaces can't be taken for granted as perhaps it once was. Are we any less ambitious for the palaces? I don't think so, but we might perhaps be ambitious in different ways, and perhaps for the time being less about big building projects and more about people, and revealing more untold and inclusive stories about the palaces, and working to reduce their carbon footprint and make them more environmentally sustainable. And certainly, after a year focused on survival, we're really looking forward to the future with a lot of optimism. Our cause is to stir the spirit of the public we serve, and we're really ready to get down to doing that again. And also, as I mentioned, we're a critical part of the UK tourism economy, so we're ready to play our part in the UK's recovery. Just to recap, we are Tower of London, Hampton Court, the Banking House in Whitehall, Kensington Palace, Kew Palace, and the great pagoda there, recently restored, and that is Hillsborough Castle and Gardens in Northern Ireland. I did also want to just show you a reminder of the Amazing Poppies display 2014, and then a display in 2018 to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. Beyond the Deepening Shadow, that was 10,000 flames in the moat every night. And then there's just one final slide, which is deliberately showing tulips at Hampton Court. Now, that's not just friendly competition with Valentina and the Rijksmuseum. It's actually just to sort of highlight that in some ways flowers are going to be a big sort of part of our recovery, which is quite a poetic thing when you think about it, really. So this April, as restrictions start to ease, we're holding our first Tulip Festival at Hampton Court, over 200,000 bulbs planted. And then in 2022, the country will celebrate the Platinum Jubilee of Her Majesty the Queen, the first such event in our history. And we're looking forward to creating something very spectacular in the moat at the Tower of London. Very much about bringing people back to the country and back to the Tower. And just a final note on that chimney. I'm very pleased to say it is getting the attention it deserves now. The conservation works, Stuart, were covered within a package of works supported with a £3 million grant for Historic England. So it will still be there when you come and visit us in the summer, or whenever you're able to get across. So that was everything I was going to say. And thanks again for the opportunity to talk about historical palaces. I hope you found something interesting in there about heritage and the UK and the response to the pandemic, and I'll happily take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. I don't have any questions for you, which means we can let you go. It's a beautiful images, and thank you for helping us, taking us through what the challenges that you faced and the hopes for the future. They are an amazing set of properties, and they're lucky to be in such good stewardship.
Thank you very much,
Simon.
Thank you.
All the best.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Next, I'm going to introduce Christopher Wynn from, well, as you'll hear, not from Edinburgh, but who is going to talk about the Edinburgh International Festival. We've tried to give you three very different kinds of organizations to talk about what this is all meant for them, what they're about, etc. So Christopher, if I can turn the microphone or the screen over to you.
Of course, Ken, thank you very much, Nancy. As you can see, I am a Montanan. I am wearing a Scottish plaid at the moment. I have been the Director of Development of the Edinburgh International Festival for 13 years. I came over here after spending 15 years at Lincoln Center in New York, the best move I ever made, and manage all fundraising and events for the Edinburgh International Festival. The Edinburgh International Festival is 3 weeks at the end of August. We are in our 74th year this year. It is a festival of classical music, opera, theater, and dance. It was formed in 1946 after the end of the Second World War. Its first festival director was Rudolf Bing, and it was brought as a way of reconciling after the war, bringing countries together again. I think our signature event in 1947 was the conductor, Bruno Walter, was brought together again with the Vienna Philharmonic for the first time from exile in the US. And it is in that way of reconciliation and bringing people together through the arts that is really our strong point and has been for the last 74 years as part of that. So around this time last year, I was on a boat with some donors celebrating our first look at this, which was our 2021 brochure, Black Forbiddingly. We had a lovely party, and some might have said a possible super spreader event, where we went through this brochure of our finished 21 program, or 20 program, and 3 days later went into lockdown. And then I have lots of these, which are probably now a collector's item, and several 100,000 that are pulped as part of that. But we managed lockdown very well. Quickly, we went through the process of, because we had been through the fundraiser for 2020, we were solid, and I began quickly confirming our donors if they were all right for us to turn their donation from the 2020 festival into resilience for the organization. And we have an amazing family of donors, of which that was not a question. So we were immediately financially solid in regards to keeping the doors open in 20 and 21 with that. Some of those donors through our Chapel York Foundation US, which we've been with them for about a decade now, managing our US tax deductible donations through Chapel York, and they're amazing. Thank you, Nancy, and the organization for that. We continued to communicate, again, the uncertainty about what we were going to be able to make happen in 21. We eventually came upon the ability to do a series of digital events that were using local musicians and musicians within the UK that we shot in our building and then live streamed. There was a piece on an hour on BBC One as that, which we produced, and we were able to make an opening event happen, which was a light spectacular around the city of Edinburgh, around our key venues that would have been in use, called Our Light Shines On, lighting those theaters basically as the ghost light would a theater if it were underused, but still possible. What it gave us in 21 was, or 20 into 21, given that we were financially solid, we were able to do a lot of things that we had been meaning to do. So we changed our CRM system, which was an arduous system if you've ever been through it. It gave us the time, as we were not selling tickets, to do that. We ripped really hard at our sustainability policy in terms of what will make us a carbon neutral festival by 2030, and what changes we need to make as an organization and how that will affect our programming. We took a good look at our diversity and inclusion program in terms of setting policy and getting our house in order on that. So in the interim, it gave us time to reflect and do some much needed work on those structural parts of the organization, and then began to plan a 2021 festival, which we are moving forward. We took I previewed this to you, and that it's not public knowledge yet, but we are building 3 outdoor venues around Edinburgh in the summer of 21, which will replicate our concert hall, our small concert hall, and a large outdoor popular music venue. So we will be presenting 70-minute long or shorter concerts to an audience of between 500 and 1,000, which is still kind of questionable in regards to social distancing. that are international in scale, but how we've taken that on is primarily through using UK orchestras, but bringing in international soloists and conductors. So to bring the international point, dance has really been a problem in terms of bringing large companies of dancers in and large theater companies in 21. So there's some work in there, but we are primarily focusing on classical music in 21 just out of necessity. It is an ever sliding scale in terms of what we are able to deliver. From a financial point, this is really going to be challenging in that we normally sell 3.6 million pounds in tickets. We will probably only be able to sell around 200 or 300,000 pounds worth of tickets this year. So our tickets will be scarce and our income will be quite low. What our resilience has been able to make us do is we're okay in 20 and in 21, and we were able to push some money from 20 into 21 because it is ridiculously expensive in terms of building 3 venues and with a reduced capacity, and frankly, just making sure that our safety and hygiene is going to work moving forward with that. But it is, I think our real challenges financially will be our 75th anniversary is next year in 22, a big year that we're wanting to be back in full fighting form. So that will be a big ticket point. But also in 21, I think that we will see massive reductions in our grants from the City of Edinburgh Council, which is on its knees at the moment, and Creative Scotland, which have been a great buttresser of funding for the festival in years past, but I think that those numbers will go down in 21 and 2022 and 23 in a way that we're going to have to rely on fundraising really heavily in that, so that we're financially solid for 20 and 21, 22 and 23. We're going to really need to be getting out the bowl and doing some very hard fundraising to make those festivals happen. We're also going through the process that Fergus Linehan, our current festival director, was set to finish his time as festival director in 22. He's agreed to move that possible year and another year forward into 23 and do that festival. But we are meant to be going through the process of selecting a new festival director for 23, 24, probably this summer. That was supposed to happen last summer. So the evergreen point of view of the festival is that really we're making it work. I think it's just that kind of point of the limberness of how we are funding is a bit maddening, I think, to our staff, to where you kind of say, okay, this is what I think it is, but we're not sure, and I can't tell you how many tickets we're going to sell, and I can't tell you how many points they are. That has been a real learning curve in terms of I would, similar to where I worked for Jazz at Lincoln Center before I came here, and I worked for the fantastic Wynton Marsalis, and being a planner and being someone who wanted everything point, Wynton would do things like he would bring some player up and say, hey, he's going to play in the band tonight, and I would consistently go, Wynton, who's going to pay him? He goes, Christopher, it's jazz. It'll be fine. And I have looked back on that period and gone, yeah, we're a bit in the improvisational stage of this, not knowing when we will be out of lockdown. Particularly in Scotland, we're in a harder lockdown than they are in England. When we have the ability to congregate and to make performances happen. But we will produce a festival in 2021, which our donors are really supportive of and are really excited about having to make. But also, I think that our festival in 22 and our 75th anniversary is going to be kind of a joyous one, back like 1947 was, in that, 47, they talked about, the blackout curtains came off of windows and rationing was still part of it. But there was such joy of people coming together and that the arts as helping the flowering of the human spirit. And I think that's really going to happen and really matter as a society and as a country here in Edinburgh in 2022.
That's such a great takeaway for all of us, I think, for the morning. So thank you for that. And we'll see if we have any questions at the end.
Cheers.
But thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Let me introduce you all now to Valentina from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, obviously. And it'll be very exciting to have some more thoughts from a different organization. Valentina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you so much, Christopher, indeed, for spreading the joy and for giving us the enthusiasm that I think we all need at the moment. Well, just a little bit about myself. My name is Valentina Salmeri-Bijzet, and I am responsible for our private donors and our international circle at the Rijksmuseum. The Rijksmuseum, which probably many of you know, is the National Museum of the Netherlands. We are most well known for our Dutch old masters. Think about, Rembrandt or Vermeer. And beyond that, we actually have also a beautiful collection of Asian art, photographs, works on paper. So we bring together 800 years of Dutch history from the Middle Ages to today. Going a little bit back in time, actually the Rijksmuseum was originally founded in 1800. Back then it was still called the National Art Gallery in The Hague. And in 1808, when the Netherlands was still under the rule of Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, it was moved to Amsterdam, to Dam Square, back then the town hall. Now, over the years, with national galleries popping up all over Europe, there was really this feeling of, the Netherlands also really deserving a real national museum of their own. And so in 1876, the state commissioned the architect Pierre Cuypers, who also is the architect of Central Station, to come up with this gorgeous building that you see here, the Rijksmuseum as we know it today. It opened its doors in 1885, and actually back then it wasn't very well received because, according to many, the structure and the architecture was too Catholic and not very fitting with what the Dutch had in mind. Nevertheless, it went ahead this way, and we had quite a few renovations over the years. The last one being in 2003, with the new Rijksmuseum reopening in 2013 and being able to welcome more than 2 million visitors every year up until obviously the breakout of the pandemic. What many probably do not realize is that actually since 1995, the museum is a private foundation, which means that we actually heavily rely on external funding from our partners, foundations, and private individuals. Basically, what you have to imagine is we get about a third of our income from ticketing. We get another approximately a third from subsidies. And then the other third comes in from the development department, the museum shop. So that's the way that we're set up. As well, actually a huge chunk of the collection from the beginning was donated by citizens. So this is really a museum. That's why I like to show also here, the Night Watch. It's really a museum of the people, built by citizens for citizens. And the Dutch take very big pride in that. Now, what the development department does to cover this income is we've basically set up in 4 different areas. The private donors that I look after, we've got institutional funds, the friend circles, and obviously our partnering companies. And what we do with the funding that we receive is that goes actually towards our main 4 pillars, as we call them, which are education and accessibility. So we always say we want to make sure that every Dutch child has been able to come and visit the Night Watch at least once in their lifetime. Obviously, the collection, which needs a lot of researching and looking after, but also being able to enrich the collection to make sure that it stays on the national and international top. Research and conservation, of course, restoring these beautiful artworks and objects, and collaborations and exhibitions with other international museums across the world. Here are just a couple of examples. I won't take you through all of them, but just to give you an idea of projects and activities that we are actually doing thanks to the benefactors and the funding that we receive. I'm just going to talk you through some of my favorite ones, starting with the Junior Fellowship, which is a program that we've put in place whereby scholars can put through an application, and we then handpick a group of about 10 of them from all sorts of schools in the Netherlands, and they get a 1 week in the Rijksmuseum, accompanied by our curators. They get specific tasks, and at the end of the week, they need to produce a paper. And that paper is then reviewed by a panel. And as you can see, we've got beautiful prizes for them. And what's beautiful about this is that it really introduces people already at a young age to art and culture. Many of these later go on into a career into the arts, and it's made possible by one of our foundations. The other really special activity that we've got going on at the moment is Operation Night Watch, which I will tell you a little bit more about later. And also, again, from a collection perspective, we've received a beautiful collection of Robert Mapplethorpe photographs 2 years ago by the Dutch choreographer Hans van Manen, that Christopher maybe will know. And this is just to show you a little bit of the diversity of the things that are possible thanks to our benefactors. Well, obviously, what we want to hear about is what happened last year. Well, 2020 hit, COVID hit, and like many other cultural institutions, also the Rijksmuseum was hit hardly by COVID-19. We were closed on several occasions for several months. As a matter of fact, we are still closed. We are not sure yet when we will be able to open again. We're hoping some point in April. Every 2 weeks, we get an important press conference from our government, and then again, we review our plans. So basically, that's how we've been operating. We've had the lowest visitor numbers in 2020 since 1964. Obviously, no ticketing income, which, like I explained before, normally makes up for a third of our income. So essentially, what you need to imagine is that we're losing approximately about $1 million per week. Many of the exhibitions had to be either cancelled or postponed because either of lack of budget or because simply international loans were not being able to be transported here. And we sadly also had to go through a tour of redundancies and restructuring the organization. Now, on the positive note, there were actually a lot of things that we were able to do, such as developing new formats for people to access the museum from home. So we created new formats such as Rijksmuseum Unlocked or Rijksmuseum from Home. And what we've seen is that actually our outreach online went really through the roof. Also on our social media channels, we went up by 25%. That's something that is obviously really going to stay, and it's been a huge and positive investment for us also in the future to reach more people and let them access the museum from home. But also there have been actually a few beautiful projects that were able to take place thanks to our benefactors despite the pandemic. And I want to talk to you about 3 of them. The first one being the Night Watch on Tour, made possible by the Elizabeth Art Foundation. Now, this is something that we developed because obviously with COVID, a lot of elderly particular are much lonelier and they get less visitors. They're obviously unable to come to the museum. So we've created a replica of the Night Watch, which is actually going to retirement homes throughout the Netherlands. And as you can see here, we have somebody from the museum talking about the painting to the people, and it's been hugely successful and a real highlight for many. Another beautiful project is our Pracht package. Basically, every year in normal times, we have one night at the museum where children with an illness, it can be a mental illness or a physical illness, some kind of illness that prevents them to come to the museum during normal opening hours and enjoy the museum. They get to come once a year during this special night with their families and their siblings. And we normally provide a beautiful program with lots of activities tailored to their needs. And all the volunteers of the museum take part to help in this. And it's a beautiful, beautiful night. But obviously, both last year and this year, this has not been able to take place. So what we've done instead, thanks to the Prachtnachtfonds, is we've created beautiful art packages with lots of different things in them to create your own artworks, and a little video made expressly for children to explain them how to do it. And this box is being distributed now to hospitals all over the country to bring the art to the kids. Another beautiful project, and here we come back to the tulips that Simon shared at the beginning, is our traineeship in gardening and landscape, thanks to the TIQ funds. And this is something that was created by somebody who really, really enjoys our gardens, which is something normally our visitors can enjoy, before or after the visit, to look at the building or just to relax, have a cup of coffee. What we're now going to be able to do starting in September is an actual traineeship for students who want to learn about landscape and gardening. And, we're confident that with things improving this year and also this being outside, this is a project that we'll be able to take forward. So where do we go from here? We've got some beautiful exhibitions lined up actually for the spring, which are already ready to go. One very important one about slavery, which is already set up. We were supposed to open in February, but as you can imagine, that still hasn't happened. So we're sort of hoping that the doors will be able to open as soon as possible. And we have a beautiful Ellsworth Kelly huge sculpture exhibition that is going to be installed in the gardens over the summer. And then in the fall, we've got an exhibition on Renaissance portraits, really looking at things like Dürer, Raphael, amazing international loans, and we really cannot wait to be able to share that with the public again. And then last but not least, Operation Night Watch, the project that I mentioned already a little bit earlier. So in 2019, we actually started with our largest research and conservation project on Rembrandt's Night Watch. And as you can see, this is taking place in the Gallery of Honor, live for the public to see. We've created this glass cage around it, and our researchers and restorers are actually working on the painting in the Gallery of Honor in front of the public. 2019 was very instrumental in starting the research process of it. We've analyzed the painting. What we're doing, we're really looking at the condition of the painting to be able to then define what needs to happen to restore the painting. What is the condition? What is the action plan? Now, obviously, in 2020, things went a little bit slower, but luckily, some of our researchers were still able to work on the painting in a very reduced manner, also throughout the pandemic. And what we now hope is that this year we will be able to go into the second phase, which is the actual restoration phase of the painting. So this is something very exciting to look forward to. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm now going to stop on sharing and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Valentina, thank you very much. That was also fascinating. There's a room in the Rijksmuseum with medieval things in there that I find terrifying. I think I've never been back since. But thank you all for really helping us to understand, the amazing response that you've made to the thoughtful and creative responses that your organizations have made in response to what's going on. So thank you very much for that. I have a question for you, and that is that fundraising case statements are so much about a crisis in funds for operations rather than, for example, a capital project. This asker's experience, it's a tougher ask of donors to give to operations. What's your thoughts? Has COVID made it more difficult, or we know that there's always that issue of giving money to basic paying staff, et cetera. Has that changed with COVID? Valentina, would you answer that first, and then Christopher?
Absolutely, Nancy. I think that's something that in the past has always very much been the case. And so particularly within my team looking after the private donors, it's something that we've always steered more towards specific projects. And interestingly, throughout 2020, what we've discovered is that actually our supporters and our benefactors have been very willing to go beyond that because they really understand the urgency. So we've seen an enormous response to just help us, what we call, making the bridge to the after, which is something that we wouldn't have necessarily expected before. So I think in that, it just really shows that once the relationship is solid enough, people really take it on board and really want to help you with anything that you need.
And our supporters and donors were so concerned about the health and well-being of the organization and that it continued to exist, that there really was not a question in regards to funding infrastructure and GOS in these uncertain times. I mean, normally these funds would be going to fantastic opera companies and orchestras on stage, but the understanding that they needed to fund us, our stability and structure has been great.
It's really been about making sure you're still there, hasn't it been? That's the whole point during COVID. Well, we don't have any other questions. I think it's been fantastic listening to you talk about your organizations, both of which are incredibly impressive, and historic royal palaces as well. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us for this first philanthropy briefing. To our participants, I hope that you found it interesting. We certainly did, and helpful in understanding this sector. Next month, we're going to be talking about women in developing countries and some of the extraordinary things that are going around. So it's something completely different. We hope that you'll be with us, and your clients and colleagues will join us as well. And just before we do stop, I just would like to introduce my colleagues. The executive director of the Chapel York Dutch Foundation, Helen Maynard Hill, and Natalie Monod, who is the executive director of our Chapel York Switzerland Foundation. Thank you very much for organizing this and for hosting it. And thank you all for coming. Please do come back to us and let us know whether this has worked for you, whether you thought it's been useful, because we really would like to have a series of philanthropy briefings which works for you in terms of learning about charities in certain sectors, and also for your clients. We are very aware of the fact that it's really important that these are not pitch sessions, but at least for me, this has been an amazing time to learn about organizations that I didn't know, kind of a behind the scenes look at what's going on. So thank you again to our participants. Thank you very much to our panelists, and have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye all.